Hello, ladies and gentlemen, world history. Welcome to your first honest to goodness video lesson. Now, this first unit is going to eventually pick up where you left off in 7th grade, but to frame that whole unit, to help you get an understanding for and an appreciation for the stuff that we're going to talk about, I wanted to show you a real world example of the differences that can exist because of the things that happen in world history that lead to changes in people's lives. I don't want to give too much away, but we're going to focus on Korea, or more specifically, two Koreas. Because ever since the end of World War II, Korea has been split into North Korea and South Korea, and hopefully you are going to notice that the two are very, very different. And yet they are one people. They speak the same language. They were in the same country up until the end of World War II. They have largely the same culture, at least up until that point. And yet today they really could not be more different. Why is that? I want you to have that question in the back of your mind as we progress through this lesson. Why are they so different today? Let's get started. This first slide is one of the most radical examples I can show you of the difference between the North and South part of Korea. In fact, if they didn't outline North Korea in red, you might think that it was just part of the ocean with the exception of a few islands. But no, this is all land inside here. The first thing you should notice is that at night, South Korea is lit up like crazy, and North Korea, with the exception of a few spots like the capital of Pyongyang here, is very dark. This should tell you, hopefully, that they don't have a lot of electricity and outside lighting in North Korea, whereas South Korea, like much of the other parts of Asia here, has it all over the place. Very, very interesting, very telling map here. The next slide here, we're going to go shopping. Now, at the top here, we have a picture of a store, a clothing store in North Korea. And notice, first of all, how dark it is and the fact that the windows are closed, which is kind of strange. I mean, you would think that a clothing store might want to open their windows and advertise, but we do not have that here. And we have a single woman with her sleeping child. It's not very crowded. They have a number of goods for sale, but it's very quiet. Kind of creepy, actually. And then you look down here at South Korea, a typical bustling street in a city in South Korea, and you can see all kinds of colorful signage and font styles and phone numbers and just ads everywhere. And it's busy. People are out and about shopping, and very fast-paced. Not so much up here. What kind of things is that telling you about the difference between the two? Let's take a look at streets as well. Not necessarily shopping, but just the streets here. In the North Korean picture, you can see, first of all, it's very foggy, kind of gray. Gray is the dominant color, really, of everything here. It's probably in the winter time, the trees have lost their leaves. Notice how few people, but especially how few cars there are for a very wide street like this. And the armed guard, the actually soldier, we're not just talking police, this is a soldier there standing. We got people there to direct traffic, although there's not a whole lot of traffic to direct. And the people that are moving in very ordered ways. They're crossing the street only at designated crossing points. Whereas in South Korea, again, there's not a lot of cars in this narrow way, but people seem to be happy. It's much more colorful. It's much busier. It doesn't seem like they're in a hurry to get where they're going, so they're not going to get in trouble. They're taking their time. Very different pictures of the streets here. Let's go to school, shall we? On top here, we have a picture of a North Korean schoolroom with these really state-of-the-art tube TVs and their cubicles. And if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like it's all boys. And these very outdated sets of headphones there. The colors are kind of disgusting. Down here we have a South Korean classroom. Immediately I'm noticing that they have computers with flat screen monitors. The class is co-ed. There's quite a few ladies in this class as well as gentlemen. We've got a teacher that's engaging them using technology. It's brighter, it's certainly less dark and intimidating. This is just kind of creepy. Now let's talk traffic. North Korea. Now you did see some paved roads, and in certain parts, especially the capital city, there is a fair number of very large paved roads. But once you get out into the countryside of North Korea, there's really not that much. It's a lot of dirt and gravel roads. You can see here someone pulling a horse cart going somewhere. Whereas in South Korea, we've got what we would see, in Los Angeles or Columbus at the beginning or end of the workday. Lots of cars, individual cars, traffic jams, very busy, very cluttered. Let's take a look at some political activity here. In the North Korean picture, we have two of the very prominent leaders of North Korea. We have Kim Il-sung, which is the first communist leader. We have his son, Kim Jong-il. And we have people that are visiting these shrines and leaving flowers and bowing down. And everyone's very quiet and disciplined and doing the same thing. Almost like they're worshiping the two leaders. In South Korea here, we have, if you can't read the language, then hopefully you recognize he is helping his child put something into this slot. They're voting. They're casting a ballot. And we can see here it's a family affair. Got a map, another map here. What is it telling us? Well, if we read the heading, it says selected North Korean prison camp locations. And we see here that we have quite a few. They've listed them here. And there's a note down here, if we can get rid of my toolbar. It says there are as many as 10 to 12 additional Kyohwa-so forced labor prison camps located primarily in the central and southern provinces of North Korea. So we're not talking about prisons here for people who are caught murdering somebody or stealing. These are for political prisoners, people who threaten the leadership, or at least the leadership believes they threaten their power, and so they don't let you speak freely. They ship you off to one of these lovely forced labor camps where you essentially perform slave labor for the North Korean government. Not really so much in South Korea here. Here is a political gathering, a large political gathering in North Korea. Things that immediately strike me is how neat and orderly everything is, very military style. And not just the military that's clearly marching here, but the citizens, the people. They are in rows. They are all saluting very enthusiastically. They're carrying signs. Everything is very neat, orderly, tidy. You can see a government building here. Everyone's wearing essentially the same colors. It's almost like the people have a uniform here, not just the soldiers. Here we have, in South Korea, another large political gathering, but this one does not appear to be a symbol of national unity where everyone's expressing the same opinion or on the same page. In fact, if you look closely, you will see we have a protest. Now, there are police there, but essentially, we can assume, as Americans having seen things like this, that the police are not there to shut it down so much as simply to make sure that everyone is safe and exercising their speech peacefully. We still have signs and banners, but while we don't necessarily, I think most of us read Korean, we can see things like Stop G20, and so they are protesting some action of the government that they are not happy with. Let's look at some numbers and some data here. And there's a few on here that are especially interesting. When it comes to life expectancy, this is on average how long somebody is expected to live in these two countries. If we look at North Korea, and these numbers are a little dated, but I think this is around 2013. At the time this was taken, it was less than 70 years old. 69.2 years old was the average life expectancy of someone in North Korea. Compare that to South Korea, it is more than 10 years older. They live to nearly 80. When it comes to internet users per 100 people, in South Korea, 81.5. That's over 81% of South Korean citizens are active internet users. In North Korea, it is less than 0.1%. Very, very few people have access to the outside internet. Let's look at this one right here. This is gross domestic product per capita. So what this essentially means is if you take the value of everything the country produces, and you divide that by the number of people, this is how productive they are. North Korean GDP per person, North Korea in 2011 only produced about $1,800 worth of everything per person. Compare that to South Korea, which produced per person an average of $32,400. Extremely more productive. This one is a very sad statistic. This is infant mortality rate. This is how many babies per 1,000 live births do not live beyond, I believe it's a year. And in North Korea, it is significantly higher, 26, just over 26, whereas it's only just above 4 in South Korea. So definitely have a better chance of surviving your first year in South Korea. Military spending, now this is interesting. This is the amount of money that the two countries spend on their military. North Korea spends a lot of money. They spend $8.213 billion in US dollars, at least in 2008. South Korea, in terms of dollars, spends a lot more. So you would think that as a share of all their spending, South Korea might spend more, but you would be very wrong. Remember, South Korea is much more productive. They produce a lot more stuff. So even though they clearly spend a lot more money, their share of the budget, that's only 2.8% of their total spending. It is almost a quarter of all government spending in North Korea. They spend a quarter of it, and they still only get that much compared to that much. And yet, if you look at their military size, North Korea has a larger number of active duty military personnel, about 1.19 million as of 2011, compared to 0.65 million in South Korea, although the United States does have a number of military bases there to help keep the peace between the two countries. Some more data and facts for you to look at. In terms of population size, North Korea is about half the number of people as South Korea as of 2014. We see in terms of political prisoners, North Korea definitely likes to lock up people that disagree with the government. A very, very, very small number in South Korea. We looked at life expectancy already here at 70 versus 81. Look at the average height. Now, this is in centimeters for a 5-year-old boy. And data coming out of North Korea is very difficult because the government likes to hide problems. But if you look at this, remember, these were the same people up until just after World War II. Well, as of 2002, your average 5-year-old boy was almost 10 centimeters taller. That's probably about 4 inches or so than a North Korean boy of the same age. And if you look at calorie availability in thousands, South Koreans have much more food available to them than North Koreans. Median age, this tells you that North Koreans generally, the median age is lower than South Korea, partly because they don't live as long. We've already looked at the light emissions at night. This tells us that North Korea is slightly larger by about 20,000 square kilometers than South Korea. They're roughly the same. But look at this one. Roads. Paved roads. Only 0.7 thousand, so about 700 kilometers of paved roads in North Korea, whereas way more paved roads in South Korea. Most of North Korea's roads are unpaved. Railways, North Koreans do have a lot more railroads. Churches, it's not even a competition. Maybe 4 in 2015, and thousands in South. Skyscrapers, big, tall buildings in the cities, only 3 in the north, and 212, that is a building taller than 140 meters tall as of 2015. South Korea had far, far, far more of those. Economy, gross domestic product, they just produce way more than South Korea in South Korea than they do in North Korea. In terms of national income, same thing. Total trade, lots of trade with South Korea. North Korea, really pretty much just a little bit with China, and that's about it. In terms of producing iron ore, basic stuff to make metal, they do a lot of that in North Korea, probably a lot of slave labor. Mobile phones, it's not even close. South Koreans dominate, and this was 2014. It's probably even farther apart than it is now, right? But when it comes to nuclear weapons, the North has a lot, so their people may be starving, but they got, a handful of nukes, whereas there are none, because South Korea doesn't really have to worry about it, because the United States and other countries help serve and protect in South Korea as well. So, some data for you to look at. We're going to stop there, and I would like you, if you haven't already done it, to answer the questions on the right, and come to class when you're actually in person, ready to discuss and share and analyze this information in more detail.